Right. Thank you. You're all set. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. If you took Kai's talk from this morning, went to ChatGPT and asked, rewrite this in the style of a cognitive psychologist, you would get my talk. So hopefully it is a slightly different perspective on things that have been touched upon already. It is a compliment, yeah. For you, not for me. So who am I? I've been an academic for about a quarter of a century. I used to be a professor of psychology back in New York City. Then I moved out here and looking for opportunities in industry. I've done a lot of work on how animals and people learn and reason, mostly from the point of view of creating computational models of these learning and memory processes. There's some of my output, as I kindly mentioned my latest book in the morning presentation. Now, go back to the basics. Why do we need intelligence at all? And the short answer is that every system that needs to produce outputs based on inputs doesn't have infinite experiences. The training data is always a finite set. In any domain, if you're an animal, you have a finite lifetime. In X years, you have to learn to survive. If you're an healthcare company, you have a bunch of patient data that you can work with. If you are predicting protein shapes, you have a database of proteins that is finite. Even if you train something on the whole internet, as it's popular to say today, it's still a finite amount of data. And the most interesting things that you want to do are outside the training set. And you need to be able to generate reasonable outputs to new inputs. If you are trying to learn what to eat, you go to the supermarket. Today you eat an apple, you like it, you don't die, so you go back tomorrow, the apple is no longer there. The other stuff that is there is slightly different. You have to recognize and make a decision in a new situation. The same, like the next patient that comes to your company is not the same patient that you treated yesterday. You want to generate new proteins, you want new content for your website and so on. It's always at pushing the boundary of what you know. By the way, all the illustration, apart from a couple, are generated by AI image generators, and you have the prompts, a condensation of the prompts. If you ever use the AI image generators, you know that you have to be very specific about the prompts. So this is an illustration that says you can't learn everything. But that is the basic idea, why you need what we call intelligence. If you only had to face a finite number of cases, you would just need a large book that tells you what to do in each of those specific cases. That's not the case in the real world. Now, what my research is about is that essentially there have been two roads to intelligence in the natural world, in biological evolution. What came first is what we refer today as pattern recognition. So you learn correct outputs with your training data. And this is something that we usually associate with the methods that we call supervised learning or reinforcement learning. And then when a new situation arises, you kind of eyeball, you have a mechanism to recognize which situations that I know about is this new situation most similar to. Does this look like an apple, or does it look like a banana? Does it look like an orange? You do based on some similarity metric. The other way of going about solving this problem is reasoning. So you try to learn how the world works. which is usually associated with unsupervised learning. You just like sit there for, I don't know, 10, 15 years, watch what goes around, and you try to make sense of it. You can make experiments also. You go to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, you drop a ball, said, how fast does it go? How long does it take to hit the ground? You learn how the world works, and then you use this knowledge in new situations. We had never been to the moon before going to the moon, but with the power of a computer that is like smaller than what is in my toaster oven or my dishwasher, we could get to the moon because we understood the physics, not because we had gone a million times and made a statistical model of what worked those million times. So these are the two main, they're not mutually exclusive, as I pointed out. You can use one or the other, and some are better in some situations and so on. But conceptually, it's useful to keep them distinct. Now, pattern recognition came first in the sense that we know that all animals do pattern recognition. And I'll just use pattern recognition to illustrate what problems you run into with this approach. Imagine you have input and an output. Now, in a real experiment, the input could be a color, and then the output you can ask people, how confident are you that this is the color that I showed you like a minute ago? You present that, I don't know, orange square for 10 seconds, and the orange square goes away, and then what you can do is to present a bunch of different colors, and you ask people, you're seeing, I don't know, this one now. Is this the one that you saw before? Yes, no. Is this the one? And so on. You test with different colors. These experiments you can do in animals, and you can do with people. You get pretty much the same answer, something like that. People and animals correctly identify the color that you presented as the most likely to be the one that you presented. And then nearby colors get similar scores. Yeah, maybe I'm 90% confident that this is what you showed me, but might be different. And then the further you go, the lower confidence or higher confidence, if you want, that was not the original color. This is perfectly reasonable, and this is what, in fact, a reasonable system should do by all accounts. When you start running into trouble is when the landscape of inputs and outputs becomes a little bit more complicated. In fact, you only need 2 points to illustrate the argument. Now what you are teaching the system is this correct, give me a high output, this color, but this is wrong, give me a low output to that color. And then, after you have taught these 2 pieces of information to your system, you ask again, with all the other colors, what is the output that you give me to all these other colors? And typically, with pigeons, people, and most simple neural network models, you get something like this. Now, this is correct on the training set, because I drew the line through the training set, but this is actually what you get in real life. It has an interesting feature that psychologists discovered experimentally. They predicted in 1936 and discovered experimentally in 1956. They made exactly this experiment, and they discovered that there is an overshoot. Colors that are further away from the bad one compared to the original correct one, he got more likes, so to speak. And this was called the peak shift in experimental psychology. It exemplifies the fact that when you have a model that is trained on a limited data, you have no guarantee, if it's just a pattern recognition model, on what it is going to do on data that were not in the training set. In fact, most of statistical learning theory is about limiting how wrong you can be on unknown data. This has recently been very recently now, years ago. It's recent in psychology, it's ancient in AI. It came to prominence and it remains to be prominence with the discovery of so-called adversarial examples. And one of the first application was generally in image recognition, but this is applied to self-driving cars. Imagine you have a stop sign. Stop signs are not all nice and neat. People write on it, people put stickers on them. This is an actual stop sign that a self-driving car would be required to identify as a stop sign. What this researcher discovered, and is exactly the same problem as the previous slide, is that you can place seemingly harmless bits of white and black tape, stop signs, and fool the AI that is inside the self-driving car to misinterpret this thing that, to our eyes, is still a stop sign very clearly. But you can fool it and say, oh, this is a 50 mile per hour sign, speed limit sign. And you can say, well, you can deploy officers and they take down all the stickers and so on and make the road safe again. Of course, that's time intensive, but you can also make the stickers appear to convey a different message. So this is like some guy, I'm sorry. You can say this is like some guy that has wanted to like write something on the stop sign, but actually those stickers also convince the system that was being evaluated in this paper. This is a famous paper from the AI literature. Misinterpret that stop sign as something else, as a completely different meaning. So the idea is that these things is particularly striking because it shows that the visual system of these models does not operate according to the principles of biological visual systems. If you train the pigeons to recognize stop signs, would still recognize these ones with high accuracy. And of course, people do that. You don't think that this is anything else than a stop sign. But it's hard to craft an AI system that has the same robustness. We have other problems. There are AI systems that are better at recognizing certain variations of inputs compared to people. This is just to highlight the problem that any system, and this has popped up in psychology, has popped up in cognitive science, and now is very prominent in AI. Every system has limitations when it is based on pattern recognition in actually recognizing patterns that are not within the training set. You can have a system that is like accurate most of the time. It's accurate in most natural variations of the input that you see, but there will always be inputs that are misclassified or that give you a problematic output. And people immediately tried to, when this was realized in AI, they tried to patch systems, make them more robust. And this, to a good extent, is effective. You can do something called adversarial training. So you train your system not only on the real data, like the stop signs, but also on, in parallel, you train another system that tries to fool your classification system. So these two systems enter into an arms race, and the output is a system that is more difficult to fool. You throw away the adversary and want to generate the actual bad, tricky inputs, and you keep the trained system, and that is more robust. You can do it in a bunch of different ways that I'm not going into. Interesting point for the point of view of the transition between pattern recognition and reasoning is that there are never any guarantees. Whenever you can make your system more robust, but you have no guarantee that Russia is not going to find a new stop sign that tricks your driving cars into attacking the Pentagon, whatever. The strong appeal of reasoning systems, which are in some sense more challenging to implement for a bunch of reasons, but the strong appeal of reasoning systems is that they can, in principle, offer guarantees. Because reasoning is a system that follows steps you can trace and understand as a human. Of course, even a large language model follows the steps. It's a computer program, but there are so many steps, and each step is such a small part of the final output that we cannot make sense of it. We cannot understand how the output comes from the input. And that is a big problem because you cannot assess the biases in the system, you cannot assess, it's hard to build the trust in this system. Other than deploying them and see that they work. You have very little a priori certainty that they're going to give you correct output. The reasoning system can say use logic, you give assumptions, and then it derives to a series of step conclusions that you can check and so on. So potentially it's appealing. And it's not that AI as a field has ignored reasoning. In fact, it was probably the first field that got traction when governments decided to fund AI. They did not fund neural networks in the 50s and 60s. They funded reasoning engines. And in fact, computer scientists came up with potentially perfect reasoning systems. There are algorithms called dynamic programming, and they are guaranteed to find the best solution to any input. Given that you have a correct model of the problem. Now, then you have to build the model of the problem. That is another problem. It turns out that building the model is actually harder than reasoning about the model. So people have come up with okay model building algorithms. The downside of two things, like why don't we use them? Because they proved not to be too scalable. The classic reasoning algorithms take exponential time in the size of the problem. Wherever the size of the problem is kind of you can define it in different ways. But exponential time is the key. You can how many possible routes are there going from here to LA? Of course, the best way is you take the I-5, but there's like impossible number of ways to go there. You could go through Rome, you can go through Paris, and then eventually end up in LA. If you then have a way to bound your search space and consider a limited set of possibilities, these generic, like zero knowledge solution algorithms that people were investing into in the 50s and 60s, they become too slow. To summarize, what research in natural intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence has shown is that it still landed on this dichotomy that for me is like between non-human animals and people, between pattern recognition, which we also have, but only humans have supplemented or complemented pattern recognition with a fully functioning generic reasoning system, which, as I mentioned earlier, has a number of big limitations, but it's still better than not having it. What really sets us apart from a hardware point of view from animals is not entirely clear. And if you ask 100 cognitive scientists, they probably have at least 95 different answers. However, it's sure that we have mental flexibility. We don't only learn what to do, but we learn ways of thinking. You can be taught different ways to approach a problem. You can be taught to solve different kinds of problems that you've never seen and have never been part of our evolutionary past. Playing chess, like no caveman needed to be able to play chess to survive. And some people instead make a living out of it today. While if you train, if you see squirrels or dogs and so on in the natural environment, they all look like squirrels to us. They all look like dogs. They all do the same things. Animals in general are much more constrained in what they grow up into compared to humans. That's the difference between a Python programmer and, I don't know, a C programmer. It's vastly more than the difference between any two dogs. Well, dogs are a bit special because we kind of selected them. Any two squirrels in the wild, they're so much alike and in the way that they see the world and they operate, that it's very hard to understand, to appreciate for us. Because in humans, you can be a ballet dancer, you can be a surgeon, you can be a piano teacher. There are like so many different things that we have invented that make us so much different from each other. And that is, you don't see this in animals. Just to elaborate on humans, so the idea is that we somehow, in our limited way, that we try to first imitate with AI and then to improve, we seem to have solved some of the hard problems that is the old AI reasoning engines ran into. So somehow we decide what to remember. You will come up, you will come out of this meeting with some memories. You cannot remember everything. You cannot remember where everyone was seated, what everyone was dressing, every single word. But you will remember something, hopefully, of the meeting. And hopefully that it will be something that is relevant to you and will help you in something for the future. But you are not deciding that consciously. There is like some mechanism that tells you, keep this, throw away that. And we actually don't know very well how that works. The second point is the problem of model building. How do I know that this is a chair, this is a useful concept to have? Maybe because I've sat on it a number of times, but I could use it as, try to use it as a basket, like put stuff on it and like carry it around. How do you parse like the input? This is probably a difficult, one of the most difficult transition points, the invention of discrete concepts. Now, discrete concepts sometimes assign, like, black and white is not a good description of how people are. But they help, they are popular because they help us to think. You cannot think about orange-red surface, approximately 85-degree angle. They seem to throw out a lot of like useless possibilities. This is has been very clear in the development of computer chess. Computer chess started to develop in 1950s, and already like Claude Shannon, the inventor of information theory, started to think about what would it take for an artificial system to be able to play chess. And he laid down most of the groundwork for later progress in chess. computer chess, including spelling out the problem that there are like so many possible chess games that we cannot teach every single one to any system, that there will always be unknown combinations. And the way that computers became better and better was until the latest revolution with deep learning and the deep mind models. Until then, it got better because the computers got faster, so they could run more simulated games before taking a decision, and they were using human expertise. So IBM, before trying to beat Gary Kasparov in the 90s with the Deep Blue computer, they hired a bunch of like very good chess players. And then they had a bunch of very good computer engineers making Big Blue one of the most powerful computers at the time. And those computers, at the time, they could, I think they analyzed at least of the order of tens of millions of moves before choosing which one to take. Actually. These now, with the newer models, is down to about 10,000 moves, I think, or maybe even 1,000 moves. If you ask, if you try to estimate how many moves each chess grandmasters considers before playing, it's about 4 to 10, because they don't consider bad moves. Automatically, they don't even see them. In fact, there is one famous quote, I don't remember from which grandmaster, but even before the era of computers, they asked him, a journalist asked him, you know, how many moves do you consider before deciding which one? And he said, I only consider one move, like the right one. Why should I consider the wrong moves? And so we have this ability to slim down the problem to something that even with our very limited hardware from other point of view is we can handle. And one way that we do this is that we use culture as a store of knowledge. And this is something that currently AI systems don't do very well. We learn a lot of things. We learn what to pay attention to. We learn rules to think from others. And we learn mental models of diverse domains, like what to do when you are at a restaurant, what to do when you are on a tennis court, how to reason about a social situation, and so on. There are a lot of things that we learn about this, implicitly or explicitly. This, again, is very apparent in computer chess, where now people are studying how computers... Now, computer chess has progressed to the point that you can run on your phone program that is better than any human. This is like in a short time span, because it was 1991, I think, when Deep Blue beat Gary Kasparov. Now this has progressed so much that it doesn't even make sense to have a game of chess between a human and a computer, because the computer wins all the time. But it still does that by using raw computational power to an extent that we don't have access to. So they still consider like 10,000 moves before making a decision. We cannot. But we have learned to use, like human chess now is different because of the progress in computer chess. Now people use computers to simulate games and so on, to find different possibilities and so on. And we are able to learn from what we see the computer doing. In this particular case, we are not ever going to get better than the computer, because chess is a problem of computational power to a large extent. But in other domains, we can still be better than current computer systems. No, this is a different topic. And what I see as an opportunity and a challenge in AI is to better integrate what we know about human reasoning and for funders to fund research into reasoning, because we are sure that it can do things that pattern recognition cannot do. However, it has not been a waste of time to study pattern recognition and how it works in animals. Because even people don't always reason. We tend to forget this about when we talk about our reasoning abilities. But there is a lot of behavior that we do that does not come from well thought out reasoning. It would be impossible. We cannot think all of those like 30,000 decisions that we do consciously. But even when we think, the outcome is not always in our best interest. Now, so there is a rat brain in the human brain that controls some of what we do, if not most of what we do. And there's also rat brain in the rat brain. That means that understanding animal-like intelligence is an asset because we use animals and we use animal behavior and learning in a bunch of applied settings. Like if you're developing drugs that influence potentially learning, memory, any psychiatric condition, any behavioral tendency, you need a behavioral protocol to evaluate those influences. If you understand animal intelligence, you can do better in research with animals, any research that trains animals. You can improve animal training. We use animals for a lot of applied purposes. And you can also improve education in all of the fields where understanding, learning, and memory is important. Now, whenever I teach psychology and I teach learning, which was one of the courses that I taught most often, people have no idea how learning works. It's one of those gray areas where like folk psychology has not arrived. We have no intuition of how we learn. And by using, I'll show you an example. To the chase, we have excellent model of how animals learn and make decisions. Much better for animals and for the animal part of our brain than for the human part of our brain. And you can use these models, you put them into AI systems, use the models so that you can do virtual experiments. You don't need to run the rat in the lab for like, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get your data. You can at least eyeball the results in a few seconds with, if you have programmed the animal model well enough. This is similar to Kai's model of a cell, but it's for the animal learning and memory. So you can simulate how an animal system reacts to inputs that you provide. And the system that I have developed has some relatively handy once you know how it works, but it's like basic language to code environments and experiences that an animal or a person may have. You can use it for different ways. This is a simulation of how cravings can develop in an alcoholic. So when you have alcoholism or another addiction, one of the most important things to understand is how to get rid of this like irresistible impulse to perform that addictive behavior. So a lot of alcoholics, they are fine. They don't crave alcohol until they have a trigger that reminds them of when they used to drink. like going by their favorite pub or something like that. And we understand pretty well how that emotional value gets attached to neutral stimuli. We have no genetic idea of what the pub sign looks like. We learned that through a series of events is associated with alcohol, being with friends, feeling good, and so on. That there's an emotional value that in a problematic setting can then start cravings to go back and drink. And this line says based on the simulation coded in that little script, it tells you how the value of the pub stimulus goes up for hypothetical, a virtual person that visited the pub a number of times. And I'm done, essentially. The take-home message is that to develop trustworthy artificial general intelligence, you need more than pattern recognition and understand how we reason and how to merge reasoning and the pattern recognition. But even before we understand that, we can still leverage what we know about lower level, so to speak, learning, because that also has applications that come from the fact that A, we use animals in a number of applied settings, and B, we behave like animals in a number of situations. If you're interested in any of these, I'll welcome discussion now or during the happy hour.